Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to write a good research question that goes along with your research project for this class. So you first might be wondering, what is a research question and why do I even need one? So by definition, a research question is a statement in the form of a question that identifies the thing that you want to study. So for the intents of this video, the thing I want to study is something about ADHD in students. So for you, the thing you want to study might involve some type of teaching intervention that relates maybe to mathematics or reading or language, something like that. So it's kind of like a general broad, you know, area, and then you'd kind of hone it down to a thing, an intervention, let's say. Okay, second bullet point. A good research question addresses the research problem, that is, an authentic problem. So think back to your buzzwords in education, and you'll recall that an authentic problem is one that has real world implications, meaning that it has implications for the students, in not only in your classroom, but probably also other students in other classrooms too. So we're not talking about something that is theoretical that may or may not impact students. This is something definite that has interactions with students and impacts on students. Okay, so a good research question addresses a research problem. So a research problem could be something like, the effects of this type of intervention, or how to increase student performance in mathematics, something like that. Okay, so a problem in that area would be maybe students have low mathematics scores, or they have low uh, language ability, something like that. So a real world problem is a problem that we are currently facing and we see in our students. Going back to that example I shared a second ago, if you look in the literature, you'll find that when U.S. students are compared to other students in other countries, we're underperforming. We're scoring below students in other countries in many of the core areas, reading, math, things like that. So we're kind of falling behind. So that's a research problem. Okay? Now, the final point here I want to make is a good research question, the why do you need it, is that it actually provides the framework for your entire study. Uh, in other words, for your entire written paper that you're going to submit to. So think of this as a spine, as a backbone to your research paper and your research study. Without it, the whole research paper kind of flops. It's not really able to stand on its own. It needs the research question to essentially guide the entire rest of the paper, because let's face it, you're only doing the research to address a research problem, like low math scores, things like that, or student misbehavior in the classroom. You're addressing the research problem by some type of teaching intervention that you're studying or you're trying to implement. So in that regard, it does provide the backbone for your entire study. Okay? Now, how do you develop a good research question? So there are 4 steps I'm going to walk you through now. And just to spell them out for you here, the first one is going to be identifying a broad topic. Then you're going to do, in step 2, some preliminary research to kind of hone that topic down and kind of get some more focus. And then you're going to even focus it even more by continuing to ask some questions pertaining to the research question and see if you can kind of hone it down to something a little more specific. And then the last step is evaluating your research question even further, and seeing if it meets a couple of criteria that I will share with you in a minute. Okay, step 1, begin with a broad topic. Okay, so think about some general areas here, whether it be, okay, mathematics could be a broad topic, science, reading, um, speech. These are all broad topics that you can begin with. Now, if you guys are teaching in an area, mathematics or reading or something, your broad topic is probably going to be pretty close to the area that you're teaching. One key point here is to make sure that you are interested in the topic, because this is something that you're going to have to stick with for 3 research courses um, or 3 whole semesters, about a year and a half here of course time. So you want to make sure it's something that you genuinely have interest in and not something that you have fleeting interest in because that's going to get really old really quick. So make sure it's something you're kind of passionate about. You know, there are some teachers who are passionate about reading or mathematics or gym, physical education. They're really passionate about the problem we're having with students who are overweight or something like that, and they're very passionate about it. So make sure that you are really into the topic that you want to study. Okay, moving on to step 2. In this step, you're going to do some preliminary, just some quick, fast and dirty research here to find out kind of what's out there, what's been done, right? So to do this, I'm going to highlight the difference between Google Scholar and just regular old Google. Some of you have never heard of Google Scholar, and that's my purpose of pointing this out to you now, which I'll do right here. To get to Google Scholar, type in www.scholar.google.com, and it brings you to the Google Scholar website. Now, as the name implies, this website is a little better than Google at highlighting or finding the hits that are particularly from scholarly sources. You have to be a little careful here because it's not a perfect system. It does give you some sources that aren't scholarly. For example, it might give you a newspaper article or something like that. But for the most part, it does a pretty good job. And I'm going to bring up just Google here on another web page, and we'll just kind of compare the differences here. So my broad area is ADHD, and I'm going to try to pinpoint this a little further. I'm concerned with how to treat ADHD, so I'm going to type in ADHD and treatment, and then see what I get. As you see here, I get over 400,000 hits, and that's way too many. Now, the general rule of thumb in research is to find articles that are no more than 10 years old. So in this case, I'll enter my custom age range here, and I'll say anything from 2010 to 2017, and I'll do a search. And if you see these links here on the right-hand side, especially if it says PDF, that is giving you full text access to that article. In our day and age, we do have access to some articles full text just using Google Scholar. So that's always a handy little source there. Kind of scroll through these pages to find a few more. And we're going to go back to page 1. And there's an article here that is particularly interesting potentially. It's about it says parental preferences and goals regarding ADHD treatment. So this sounds like it's a pretty interesting article. Just be careful though, because remember what I said, that Google Scholar isn't a perfect system. Let's make sure that this is a good, legitimate source, a peer-reviewed source. This is from Pediatrics, that's the journal name. If I scroll all the way down, I'll see that this is Pediatrics is the official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics. So that sounds pretty legit. And if I did a Google search on this journal, I'll bet you I would find that it is indeed peer reviewed. But let's do the same thing here. This is just a regular Google web search here, and I'll show you what I find. You'll find this too when you're looking up articles. The first few hits I see here, ad. These are all ads. These companies will pay Google to get prime real estate here in the first search hits that you see. And that's definitely not what you want to see because that's going to be very biased information that's in there. But anyway, let me scroll down here. This is a website called myadhd.com. Here, if you were to read this, you'll find, this author has, whoever wrote this, provided some useful information here, but this is a good example of what I do not want you to use. Let me repeat that. I do not want you to use websites like this. I want you to get in the habit of looking at stuff from Google Scholar at least, minimally. Best case scenario would be our library system, because this is scholarly information, and we know this information is legit. it's been checked for accuracy, integrity, and things like that. We know it's very good information. Information from websites like this can be biased. It's not necessarily checked for accuracy or integrity. So this website, although it looks informative, could be full of information that is not accurate. It's biased. So just be careful with it. Doing a regular Google search can be helpful at this stage of the game where you're just trying to find the nitty gritty, quick and dirty information about the topic. Is this something that's even doable or worthwhile into pursuing? But I just want you to be really careful not to get too focused on articles. I won't even call this an article, websites like this, because look at this particular one. There's not even an author listed here. We have no idea who wrote it, and things like that. So I just would caution you against using information like that. Okay, let me go back to step 2. So your goal here is to just kind of do a nitty-gritty search, find out what's out there, what research has been done. If you find no research at all out there on your topic, you're probably not using the right search terms. So I would invite you to change up the search terms you use some buzzwords, things like that. If you don't have any luck still, reach out to one of our librarians or your instructor, and they might be able to point you in the right direction. Okay, what's already been done? Maybe there's some research out there. You might think it's a bad thing that research has been out there and it's been done on this topic, but it's actually good because it shows you that this is a worthwhile topic, and maybe they can point you in another direction. You can do a spin-off of one of their studies. You know, every study has some weakness or something that they missed. So maybe you can pick up on that and do a little spin-off or continuation of their research. So your goal here in step 2 is do some preliminary research, find some sub areas within that broader topic. So my broader topic was ADHD. I'm looking more for treatment for ADHD, particularly treatment that's classroom oriented. Again, if I'm interested in treatment for ADHD and I'm a classroom teacher, I'm probably going to be going down the wrong road if I'm looking at medicinal treatment because, I'm not in the medical field. I don't have a medical doctor working with me. I'm not a medical doctor prescribing medicine to these students. So it's not the direction, that is really the best direction for me. I want to look for things that are applicable to me and my field. So, I'm going to look for things I can do in the classroom. The last bullet point here is what type of research has been done. And this can give you some more ideas. Maybe it's all, qualitative where they interview a student or interview a parent. Maybe it's all quantitative. Maybe the research has been done that has focused on a certain age group and you want to focus on a different age group. So these are all different things to kind of look out for, okay? Step 3 is continue to narrow your question a little bit further. You want to focus your area so that it becomes something that's more doable for you as a researcher. Okay, so ask important questions such as what are the contributing factors to the research problem? So we have a research problem already. Let's say our research problem, sticking with the ADHD one, is we have students in our classroom who have ADHD and who are exhibiting some pretty negative behaviors in the classroom, distraction and things like that, and therefore they're taking away from not only their learning but also the learning from other students around them, right? So that's a problem. So what are some contributing factors to this? And then what are some effective treatments for it? What are some good interventions that I could use? Okay, so contributing factors could be, what is potential things that are overstimulating the students in the classroom. Maybe there are too many lights going on. Maybe there's too many windows open. Maybe there's, the windows to the hallway are open and the students walking by. Placement in the classroom, seat placement of the students, things like that. Let's go with a mathematics example here. So we have students' low test scores in math, low performance in math. That's a research problem. What are the contributing factors to it? Maybe you like the idea of looking at homework. Is that a contributing factor? Are students not doing enough homework? Are they doing too much homework? Are they doing not the right type of homework? Are the parents not following through and checking their homework? So these are all contributing factors, potential contributing factors that, one of these might interest you. Okay? Once you find a couple of these contributing factors, once you identify them, then start asking yourself, okay, what are some effective treatments for that? Okay? So let's say we're, with the ADHD example, we have students exhibiting negative behaviors in the classroom. Some contributing factors could be boredom. Maybe they're bored in the classroom, and they need to expel energy. Maybe they're just kind of too bound up. So I came across a treatment. This is a real treatment for ADHD, and this is students doing exercise in the classroom, yoga, or other types of exercise in the classroom. Students expel energy, and then they get focused. So that could be an example of an effective treatment. So another one you could do in the classroom, meditation, things like that. So think about your area. Maybe it's mathematics, maybe it's reading. What are the contributing factors to low reading ability? What are some effective treatments for it? So as you pose these questions and try to answer them, you might need to go back to Google Scholar and kind of do some back and forth to find out what's the research out there on that particular sub area. But you want to kind of hone down your topic a little further. Step 4, and the last step, is evaluating your research question. So I like the idea of looking at exercise as a potential treatment for symptoms of ADHD. Came up with a question, and my research question is, what is the effect of exercise on the prevalence of negative behaviors among high school students with ADHD? So what I want you to do is, once you kind of develop your research question, get a good idea of what it looks like, go through these questions to evaluate it, to make sure that it meets these criteria. Is it interesting? Not only to you still, but also, is it interesting to other people? Is in that regard, is it applicable to others? Okay. Along the same lines is, you don't want it to be so narrow. Here, this is the third evaluation question. You don't want it to be so narrow that it really isn't interesting or applicable to other people. What do I mean by that? Right now, if you look at my research question, I'm just focusing on just high school students with ADHD. What you don't want is, you don't want it to be so narrow, such like kind of like this. What is the impact of students, of male third grade students with ADHD who also have autism? Okay, that is something that is really, really narrow. I just kind of, you know, narrow the scope of my research study so much that it might not be applicable to others, and then also might not be interesting to other people as well. So you want to make sure it's not too narrow. But you also want to make sure that it's not too broad either, right? So if I say something like, what's the effects of, just exercise among students, or what are differential treatments for ADHD? That's too broad. I need to make it specific, so I'm honed in on one particular treatment and one particular population. In this case, high school students with ADHD. Okay, so it's kind of like a balancing act here between becoming too broad or too narrow. And again, if you have questions, ask your instructor. They'll definitely be able to help you. Other things. Is it measurable? So you want to make sure that it's something that you can measure, because if not, then it becomes more subjective, and you want it to be objective. So something that is objective is observable, it's countable, and therefore it's scientific. If it's not scientific, if it's not measurable, it doesn't really pass muster in the science world, right? So here, in this example, I can calibrate the amount of exercise that a student is given. I can say, let's go with the yoga example. I can say a student has to engage in 5 minutes of yoga using these 3 exercises. I can calibrate that, and I can give a very precise level of exercise for each student, right? So that's measurable in that regard. Negative behaviors, this is, you'll learn this soon. This is my dependent variable. That's the thing I'm looking at. You can observe and therefore count, measure a student's exhibition of negative behaviors. You can count that. So in that regard, it's measurable too. Things like thoughts, opinions, feelings, those are not as measurable. So you just want to steer a little clear of that, because if it's not measurable, not countable, it's going to be hard to pass muster in the science world. So again, if you have questions about that, ask your instructor. But student performance, is definitely something that is measurable and objective. Something like that will be a good idea. Okay, and then something that is doable. So think back, kind of reflect on what your idea is for your study and think to the idea of whether or not this is doable. If I say that I also want to incorporate IQ testing for every single student in my school and engage in you know uh, three different types of IQ tests, that's probably not going to be very doable. Each IQ test has to be administered by a professional, and it takes 3 to 4 hours to complete. Right. So in the time frame of uh, 12 weeks that you have to implement your study in the next course, is that something really doable? Is your school counselor, school psychologist, sorry, going to be able to give an IQ test? First of all, agree to do it, get parental consent to do this, and then administer an IQ test for every single student in your school? Probably not, right? So, is your idea doable? Is it something that you have access to? If I have students, if I teach a classroom and it involves just 10th grade students, but I want to really study on pre-K or kindergarten students, it might not be doable, for me in my particular situation because I might not have access to kindergarten students. I might really, really want to do an experimental study, but I'm a special education teacher with 4 students on my roster for this coming year. It's not going to be doable for me to do an experiment. I have to find out some other way of experimenting, some other way of designing my research study. Okay? So those are the 4 steps to coming up with a research question. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have more questions, again, feel free to ask your instructor and they will be more than happy to help you. Okay? Bye.